Do you know what's stopping you from doing that one thing you've always wanted to do? You don't, because it doesn't exist. This is Josh Bauer, and no, it really doesn't exist. I'm going to talk about the state of AI when it comes to coding and where it's at and what I have found to be the best resource so far to do it. And even when used, what issues you'll run into when you use this resource. So I've been using AI to code since I'd say the early-ish, since the start of last year, which was 2024, when I used ChatGPT specifically. I think 4A, if I'm not mistaken, was the most recent model at that point, and I was paying $20 a month for access to it. And I used ChatGPT to code the front page of my Corner Tactics website, which is basically an online store for 3D printed chess sets. And up until that point, I really had never, don't get me wrong, I've coded a couple web pages from scratch, both in high school and in college. In each case, it was sort of a class or a course, respectively, whether we're talking about high school or college, that I had to take in web coding. So I took a web coding class in high school and a web coding class in college. And in each of them, I coded a website using HTML, CSS. I don't really think I used any Java, but HTML and CSS. And in both of those cases, I coded a small, basic little website. In fact, if you want to check out the one I did in high school, it's still active at webcoding.joshbauer.com. And there's actually a web coding preview tool on there, which not only I use, but some of my friends actually still use it to code websites. It's pretty handy. It basically is just a web previewer for your code without having to upload. Whenever you make a new HTML file, usually you have to save it and then upload it in order to see what it looks like. But with this tool, you just paste the code and hit a button and it shows you right there. Anyway, I'm getting off track a little bit. Basically, I haven't really coded much from scratch when it comes to making websites outside of those two classes until AI came along. So until AI came along, what I was using for web building is these pre-built web builders. So the most prominent one that I've used ever since 2019 is Google Sites, which is basically a very, very simple drag and drop web builder. As soon as AI came out, I realized that I had the potential to actually code a website from scratch using the help of AI to do the actual coding, and where I would just tell it what I want it to do. And I heard from other people that this worked, and it worked very well, and so that's why I decided to try it. And I was pleasantly surprised with the ability of ChatGPT to do what I told it to when it came to making code that aligned with the preferences that I gave it. And there were a couple issues that I ran into, and again, this was a year ago, so I don't remember all the details super well, but I know that there were definitely a couple issues that me and it had to hash out when it would do something a little bit incorrectly, and I would have to correct it and say, no, I want it done this way instead of that way, or yes, you fixed the issue, but now this is messed up. Can you go back and fix that without, messing up the issue that you just solved? And there's a lot of that. And, but I ended up getting it done. Now, that's a website. And now websites, I guess this is me speaking as someone who has experience in websites, and so maybe this isn't true for everyone, but to me, websites are somewhat simple to build. HTML is pretty simple. It's just one file. I mean, you can create a one-page website with one file. Just an HTML file. You can have the CSS inside the HTML file and all that. Just one file. And basically, it has to have a couple things, like a couple, I don't know, like very basic. Like you can have just a text, like a P tag, which stands for paragraph, and put text inside the paragraph, and voila, you have an HTML file just like that. You upload it to the internet, and then you go to the page, and it's got some text on there, and technically that's a website. Even though it would be nice if it had a couple more tags to make it, indexable in Google search so that people can find it and everything. At the end of the day, none of that stuff is required. If you have just like a couple tags with a title, maybe a text, even an image, there you go. There's a website. It might not look very good, but it is a website. Now with an app, which, in case I didn't already mention, this is going to be the main topic of the episode. With an app, it is nowhere near as simple, and I've always known that apps are way more complicated than a website. And because of that reason, for example, before AI ever was really a player in this space, I basically settled with the idea that I would never be an app developer, or that I would never be able to make an app, just because of the amount of complication that I knew it involved. So number one, as opposed to an HTML file, which you'd basically just have to go in and make tags, make a couple tags and put some content in there and be done. A browser needs to read the HTML file, and a browser is super, super lenient in terms of what types of tags an HTML file must have in order to be considered a valid website. Basically, as long as it's got content, it's a valid website. In fact, if you go and experiment with this, you'll see you don't even have to add a tag. If you just create a TXT file on your laptop and type in the TXT file hello, right? The word hello, HELLO, and save it as a TXT file, but then change the extension from TXT to HTML and upload that to a server, even without any tags before or after that sentence. As long as you're using a reputable browser like Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer, Firefox, etc., that HTML file, the text that you put in there, the word hello, will show on that page. So very, very basic. Now don't get me wrong, that's not the right way of doing it, but it still works, is my point. You try doing something like that in an app and it doesn't work that way. First of all, even if we're talking about an APK file, forget the Google Play Store, forget the App Store and Apple, forget all the publishing requirements. Let's say we're just talking about an APK file, which is basically the file that Android OS uses to, the file that an app is in if you are going to sideload it to an Android device. And sideload just means that you are going to download and install the app without downloading it directly from the Google Play Store. Instead, you're just transferring it or downloading it from somewhere else. And that sometimes is how you get malware if you're not careful with the apps that you download, because they could be coming from a malicious source. But if they're coming from a trusted source, there's no issue with sideloading. But even if you're just using an APK file, there's so much more involved than just opening up a file and typing in text and putting an image in there. And it's so much more that I don't even know how to describe it, because I've never done it, but I know it's very, very complicated, and I've seen some things that are involved with it. Not enough to properly describe it, but enough to know that it is not something that I would ever... Don't get me wrong, it's not that I couldn't do it. It's that if I wanted to do it, by the time I learned enough to be able to do it effectively and successfully, I probably would have wasted more of my life on it than I prefer to waste on something like that, especially considering that you never know how quickly technology is going to evolve, and the whole technology universe might shift away from apps and shift towards something else. I mean, I don't see that happening in the immediate future. However, over the next 10-15 years, there's certainly a possibility in which apps, as we currently know them, especially the way in which they are coded, is completely different, and all the knowledge that I had learned is completely obsolete and no longer applicable to anything useful. So that's not something I want to waste my life on. So because of that, I said, okay, I'm probably never going to be able to create an app unless I pay someone to do it. And I will be honest, during the time that I was hiring and paying a lot of people from the Philippines to do some of these tasks for me, I had considered paying one of them to develop an app if I had ever gotten to the point where I had an app. At the time that I was paying a lot of people from the Philippines, I didn't have a specific idea in mind for an app. But, it was one of those things in the back of my head where I figured that if I ever did need it, there are definitely app developers in the Philippines, people that have not much better to do and they don't really have many bills because bills are covered by family members, but they have a laptop and maybe an internet connection, so they have a lot of time that they spend on the internet and they learn these things for fun. And then there's people down there that do it, as a job too, or as freelance or whatever, and some of these people know what they're doing. And I figured, if I ever really need it, I'll just hire them. And so that said, until AI, that's how I felt about apps. Like, I'll never make one. If I do, it'll be paying somebody else to make one. When AI came into the scene, I still never really thought about coding apps, and the reason is, with something like ChatGPT, which is an online copy and paste code generator, which means that it cannot directly modify your files. It can only spit you out text and you have to copy and paste them. And that works for simple files. For example, that chess page that I was making, that was just one index.html file that I was making, and it was just a front page. I wasn't making a whole website. The whole website was actually hosted on WordPress. And basically what I did was just on WordPress, I set it so that the home page would be a custom HTML file. And then I had the ChatGPT AI code me that one specific homepage HTML file. But if we are talking about having the online version of ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Meta AI or any other online AI try to code you a multi-page website which uses multiple files, and especially ones which need to reference other files, the fact is that those AIs just do not have the memory capacity to be able to reference other files and other resources like that. And so it's going to be almost impossible. It's going to be extremely frustrating if you try to use AI in a capacity that it doesn't have the memory or, quite frankly, maybe even the intelligence to do yet. But I wouldn't say it's really actually about the intelligence. I'd say it's more just about the memory and the sources that it's available or that it's able to pull information from. Because it can only pull information from what you tell it. And maybe in some cases you can upload a specific file. But even if you upload a whole folder of files and it makes changes, it won't make changes to those files themselves. It will just tell you what the changes should be, and then you have to copy them and paste them back in to the original files. And then if you want it, you'd have to upload the files all over again with the new changes for it to know exactly what they are. And keep in mind that with ChatGPT specifically, there's also an output limit, which was one of the things that actually made it so that I could not code a new website that I had thought of recently, which was called Price Clicker, and this was going to be I want to say software as a service, but it would be a website, not a Windows application or anything. So I don't know if technically it even falls under the software as a service category. I would say it does. It's just an online software. Anyway, I was going to code this whole thing from scratch, and it was a business idea that I had, and I still have, and I still probably will end up doing. I just need to wait for the AI to get a little bit better. But at the time, I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to try to do a multi-page website, even though before I only did a single-page website. And this idea would have been like a month and a half ago that I had this Price Clicker website idea. And I'm not going to go into detail about what the business idea was, but we're just going to say it's a multi-page website that involves individual users signing in and different levels of users, different, clearance tiers, or like different tiers of users, basically, and subscription models and everything, and recurring billing and everything. So it was going to be very complicated. I tried using ChatGPT at first, but the very first issue I ran into was the fact that ChatGPT has an output limit in terms of how much text it can generate within one message. And so if it tries coding you an entire file, it can do that to a certain point. But when the file gets too long, it'll get to the point where when it spits out the text that you should replace your file with, it'll get cut off. like 3/4 of the way through, and then you won't know what the last quarter of the HTML file is supposed to be, unless maybe you just use whatever was there before. But it's a lot of work, and if the AI made changes to what was there before, then you have no way of knowing what those changes were, unless you ask it to spit out that code base in segmented chunks, and then you piece it together yourself. And there's a lot that can go wrong with that too, especially if you're having to do it over and over. And sometimes, ChatGPT might give you the first and the second and the third, but by the time it's ready for it to give you the fourth, it no longer remembers what it's supposed to do because its memory only goes back a certain number of messages, which is a big problem. So, all that said, ChatGPT had a lot of issues when it comes to coding complex multi-file projects, whether that be a website or an app or probably other things that involve multiple files and a lot of code even within one file. So ChatGPT would have been no good for that, as I learned the hard way, and it also would have been no good for this app idea that I just came up with not too long ago, and that's what I'm going to start talking about next. So I really had no intention at all on coding an app, and to be honest, I hadn't even thought of the idea that AI could code an app, and I didn't really think it would be capable of doing so. And the reason why I didn't think it would be capable of doing so is because I had assumed that at this point in time, AI had not surpassed the ability of what I already knew ChatGPT to have, meaning, as far as I knew, all the different AI models out there were only as good as ChatGPT in terms of the output restraint and also the ability to not reference multiple source files. And, I had assumed maybe there was some AI stuff out there that was a lot better, but it was probably used only by companies that could really afford to pay for it, and governments and that sort of thing, and that normal people like us, unless we had a bunch of money to throw at it, which I really don't at the moment, would not be able to access that level of ability of the AI and that level of intelligence and memory and everything. So I figured, it wouldn't be possible. Well, this thing happened which made me want to develop my own app. And basically what happened was an update that was pushed by Instagram, in which the home feed of your profile, which used to be a grid of squares, whether you have posts on your profile grid or reels, and if you have posts, no matter what layout those posts were, landscape or portrait or anything else, they would always be chopped into squares. And when I say chopped, they would only be chopped if they weren't squares to begin with. If they were squares to begin with, they would just be properly displayed. It wouldn't be chopped. And in my case, back in 2019 when I first got on Instagram, I looked at a profile grid and I said, hey, you know what? These are all squares by default. So if I want to optimize how my profile is going to look, I am going to make all my posts perfect squares, because that will make it so that my profile grid looks perfect, because all my photos are perfectly cropped and there's nothing that is an important part of the photo that will be cropped out when you're looking at it on the grid view. And so fast forward 6 years, right, 2019 to 2025, or maybe 4 years since I got on Instagram in late 2019, and now it's early 2025, so we'll say 5 years. Fast forward, and Instagram decides that because of all the reels that are getting posted on Instagram, which are predominantly vertical, and because they are trying to get everyone to put their reels on the profile grid instead of just on the reels page, which if you've noticed, if you follow me on Instagram, you have noticed that I keep them in a separate tab and I don't mix them together because I don't think they have any place being mixed together. But a lot of people do, and Instagram wants you to put them together for whatever reason. And because there's so much content on Instagram that is now vertically oriented, they said, you know what? We're going to move away from the squares, and we are going to take everything and chop them instead into vertical rectangles. And when I say vertical, I just mean that the height is larger than the width. If I remember correctly, it's a proportion of 5 to 4 or something, which doesn't sound... Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's a more extreme proportion, or than that. But 5 to 4 doesn't sound too bad. But when you look at it, it is a very noticeable rectangle. So it's probably more than 5 to 4. But whatever the case, it is a noticeably vertical rectangle. And it quite honestly just screws up all of my pictures. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's being a little dramatic. I don't like that they did that. Let me put it that way. Now, from a business perspective, I understand that businesses need to make pivots and need to kind of look at what the future is going to be and adjust features and everything, and that whenever they do something like that, there's going to be a group of people that don't like what they do. And I'm sure there's some things that a lot of tech companies did that I liked their update, and there was a couple people that didn't like their update. And that's just how it works. If I was to talk about Chrome, Chrome is a perfect example of a software that many times pushes updates that are just stupid as hell, and I don't know what they actually. Okay, so for example, Google Chrome right now, in the left side has this dumb little down arrow where you push it and you can click on all the tabs that are already open that you can already see horizontally across the top of your tab. So it's very, very redundant. Not only is it redundant, but I used to be used to just dragging my arrow all the way up to the top left of the screen so that I could click my very first tab. But now if I do that, my arrow's not on that very first tab. My arrow's on this other stupid little drop down, and I have to intentionally move it to the right a little bit more. And, this sounds like I'm being maybe petty when you're listening to it, but when you're used to a workflow like this, I don't know. It's just the time. So I had always had a specific to-do list tab pinned as my very first tab, and I would reference it very, very frequently. So when it now takes me an extra half a second to get to that tab, and I access that tab multiple times per day because that is the tab that I use to basically run my life because it's my acting to-do list, right? And every time I click that, it now takes half a second longer. You might think it's trivial for me to complain about that, but the fact is that time really does add up over a long period of time. And it's not even the fact that they added the feature that pisses me off. It's the fact that there's no way to disable it. That's the thing. And, with Instagram, with the squares, I guess there's a way to add space above and below but it just doesn't work, right? It doesn't change the rectangle shape. It just makes it so that there's a bunch of useless space in between some of your photos. So, they do their best job to appease the people that they know are going to hate the update, but it doesn't really, it doesn't make it better. I'm sorry. So that's just a disclaimer. Like, I know I'm one of the, probably in the 5% or less of people that are actually bitching about this versus the people that don't mind it because most of their pictures actually are vertical. But I also think it's kind of frustrating that people like me who analyze the platform from the very beginning. I'm talking 2019 when I first got on this app. I would have been, how old? 16? I was 16 when I looked at this and I said, okay, I'm going to look at the build of this app and the layout, and I am going to perfectly optimize my content so that here on out, every single picture I have will look perfect in the context of how this app is built. And then, not even that many years later, the app decides to completely pivot their whole layout so that everything that I intentionally did so as to basically appease that platform is now invalidated and is now irrelevant. Like, everything, all the content that I put up is just now completely messed up because I had put the energy into constructing my content into a layout that would be optimal for that specific platform, and then that platform decided to say, nope, we're switching it up. And that to me is, I don't know, that's just extremely frustrating. But that said, it's kind of funny because, well, let me put it this way. I didn't necessarily have plans to leave Instagram before this, but I was always kind of preparing for the case in which Instagram suspends, or what do you call it, just permanently terminates my profile. And the way in which I had been preparing for that situation is simply just backing up all my Instagram photos, because obviously, I take the pictures, and so theoretically, in a lot of cases I edit them, so theoretically I should already have them, but they're scattered all over my, profile, or all over my Google Photos. I have to scroll for ages if I were to pick them all back out, and even then I don't remember which ones I posted, which ones I didn't, and stuff, so, I have a folder. I've had a folder for like a couple years of all the Instagram profiles that I post. I always just put it in a folder too. So in case my Instagram profile ever gets deleted or something, I have a way of like at least knowing what photos I posted. But that said, I never really had an intention of leaving the app. That was just a backup in case I got kicked off the platform. But after this update happened, this was the last straw, because yes, I use stories, and yes, more recently I have started to use Reels, but stories is not exclusive to Instagram. Not only are stories not exclusive to Instagram, but they didn't even originate with Instagram. If I remember correctly, which I'm pretty sure that I do, stories originated with Snapchat, which is another app that I have almost never used. I signed up for it back in 2019, just like I did all the other social media apps, and I think I stopped using it in 2020 or somewhere around then. It was just kind of a dumb app in my opinion, really childish. But that said, stories originated with Snapchat, and Instagram stole the stories from Snapchat. And just like that, just in the same way, Instagram also stole the Reels idea from TikTok. So almost nothing is original to Instagram except for the grid profile layout. And the only thing that was original to them, and the only thing that I actively and substantially liked about specifically my profile on their platform, was that square grid layout, and they just decided to ditch it. So in the same manner, I decided to ditch them. The problem was, I looked at what alternatives do I have. So if I want to keep squares and I want them to look good, I'm going to have to find an alternative, because I was not keeping them on Instagram in rectangle format, and there's no way in hell I was going to go back and actually re-edit every single one of my pictures to look good in a rectangle, or expand them using generative AI, or expand them using my original photo and just cropping them differently. I wasn't going to do any of that shit. I'm not going back and modifying 100 and something photos just to keep it looking good for a platform that completely disregarded all of my previous attempts to optimize my content for their platform, and they just say, fuck you, we don't care about it anymore, we're just gonna switch it up again, and good luck. And so I said, okay, I'm just not dealing with this platform anymore. So I had to find an alternative. So what did I look at? I looked at VSCO. The problem was, there were a couple issues that I had with VSCO. Number one, with mostly the type of people that would use it, and it had sort of a certain type of stigma. And number two was the fact that a lot of times you would have to sign in order to view somebody's entire profile. And there were a couple other issues in terms of the layout and form, like just the layout and just how it looked. And when I say layout, I mean both the heading it had up there. I also don't like the cookie banners and the sign in prompts. Not just sign in order to see the more content, but just sign in general. Like, they really try to push you to get on their app. And also, when I say layout, I mean the layout of the images. I don't know if you're able to control it, but in some cases they would not be, well, in all cases, they would not be in a perfect grid. They would be like just kind of scattered. If there were vertical ones, there would be like one vertical one on the right and two horizontal ones to the left of it. So it just wouldn't be very organized. A couple other ones I looked into were Flickr. I looked into Pinterest. I looked into Tumblr. And I looked into Imgur. Now, Imgur I've been using for a while, but not as a social media platform, just for an image hosting platform when it comes to website hosting and stuff. Now, I haven't been using it systematically, like for a lot of content, but every now and then when I just need a quick .png image to share with someone or something, I'll upload it to Imgur. Pinterest, maybe Pinterest would have been what I'm looking for, or let me rephrase that, more what I'm looking for in terms of formatting. But just the branding of Pinterest. It's not even the layout, more so the branding of Pinterest. I think it's just kind of dying. I mean, when anybody says Pinterest, people just think of like, I don't know, 10 years ago, and that when I say, oh, I'm not on Instagram, but I'm on Pinterest, I don't know, it just doesn't have the quite the branding ring to it. And it's not that Pinterest, the word itself, is bad. Again, it's just about the fact that when people hear Pinterest, it's more of like old ages type thing that comes to mind. And so I didn't really want that brand of, I didn't really want that retrograde brand tied to my content. And so for that reason, I didn't want to go with Pinterest. Tumblr, just for a similar reason to VSCO in terms of the layout, and in a similar way to Pinterest, in the sense that it's kind of an inferior platform. I just didn't want to be associated with that either. And another one I was interested in is Flickr. And I go to that, and what do I see? I see a huge header with a bunch of header options that are just scattered all across the screen, even on somebody's profile, right? There's still all the standard Tumblr sign up, see categories, see these pictures, and they're not all pictures from that guy's profile. They're pictures from a bunch of other things, explore, those types of tabs. And I didn't like how half of the top of the page was stuff irrelevant to that person's profile, and I didn't like that. And also, Flickr is kind of considered an inferior version of Instagram. Like Flickr, Tumblr, all these apps are like, people that don't like Instagram, they go to these apps, but I don't really think that they're better, and none of them even had that perfect grid layout that I was looking for. Even Flickr was just everything everywhere in terms of the photo layout. I just didn't really like it. So I said, okay, this is where we're at. I am not staying on Instagram. We have already established that as a fact. With that said, I have looked at other platforms that I, have heard of, and none of them quite fit the bill of what I'm looking for. And so the next place I could go from here is for me to look into some platforms that are a little bit less common, but then the problem you run into is, what if they shut down? The fact that they're less commonly known means they might be more desperate for money, which means they might have a lot more ads, or they might, like I said, they might shut down, or they might sell out, in which case the whole thing might change by whoever buys it if it's acquired by another company. And also, if nobody's heard of it before and you tell people to go to your whatever profile, like of whatever the name of the company is, are they going to be a little bit suspicious of it? Like, why are you on there? I don't know. And it's not really so much that like a judgment thing, so much as you don't want it to seem scammy. For example, if you have a link in your profile and it's to a site that nobody's ever heard of, but it's you showing off images, I don't know. If it depends, I guess it depends on what the name of the domain is. If it's like Photoly, like PHOTOLY.com or something. I mean, nobody's heard of that, and I don't even know if it exists. I just made it up. But it sounds like it might be reputable, right? So maybe people will click that because it kind of, it says the word photo and has the word, it sounds like it might just be photos. But if you have like arcintiga.com or something, it's like, you don't want to use something that's just weird because it's going to look like a scammy link. So that's another reason. It's like, when it comes to finding sites that are less reputable, I didn't really want to waste time on digging through 100 sites that I've never heard of before, trying to figure out which ones are decent and all that. So I said, okay, I am going to make my own app. Now, I at first assumed that I was going to hire out to the Philippines, and I assumed I was going to have to invest maybe 100 to 200 hours into this, into managing and into communicating with the people and explaining to them what I wanted and telling them feedback about what I wanted them to do differently and how I wanted them to change things and improve things and how they did things wrong, fix issues, etc. And I also assumed I was going to end up putting probably anywhere between $1,500 and $2,000 into this when I assumed that I would be outsourcing it. Now, that would be probably cheap if you're paying an American, but people from the Philippines work for much less when it comes to wages, and it's because they're their economy is a little bit. I actually don't know what the economy comparison is. I don't want to say their economy is worse because I don't really have the knowledge to be able to say that authoritatively. But I know that their currency is worth less than American dollars. I do know that for sure. And whatever the situation with their economy, they're willing to work less. Or willing to work for less in terms of American dollars. So that said, it would not have been as expensive as if I had paid an American to do it, but I already know some people from the Philippines, and a couple of them are app developers. So I said, okay, I'll start with some of these, and if they can't do it, I'm sure they'll know people that can do it, and if they can't, then I'll go back and I'll find more the way that I found those original ones. And that's what I did. Okay, so after that, I said, okay, even if I outsource this to people from the Philippines, I still want a basic knowledge of how to code an app, like the basic knowledge. What is an APK file? What files does it consist of? Because an APK file is really just like a zip folder. And what makes an app? What is a coding language? What different coding languages are there? What is the navigation logic between these things? And that's not a question that I asked myself at first, but it's a question retrospectively that it is kind of what I was looking for. And I said, okay, I'm going to go to YouTube for some of this information because YouTube, I think, is kind of one of the best places to go when you're looking for this stuff. And so I went to YouTube, how to code an app. I think I looked up something like that. And ironically, I think I was at work when I looked this up. I'm not so sure. I'm pretty sure I was at work. In any case, I looked it up on it was a computer at work. And I had a couple hours free because we were in between flights for Frontier. And I looked this up, and one of the first, the first video I watched was about how to go into Android Studio and actually physically, personally start coding an app. And you know what? It wasn't too terrible. I looked at this and said, okay, this is complicated as hell when I first looked at it, and even as I was watching a lot of the video, but then I said, maybe this is manageable, right? I was looking at it, and I was thinking, okay, you drag this to the right and drag it to the left, and when you do that, it snaps to both the right and left and makes it centered. Okay, I understand that. If you drag it to just the left, it makes it left aligned. Okay, you add text by doing this. You add a photo by doing this. This is how you make the text relative to the photo instead of relative to the edge of the screen. I said, okay, I kind of understand how this works. It's gonna, it's a learning curve. It's gonna take a lot of practice and making mistakes and stuff, but I kind of understand the idea of it. And this was Android Studio. This wasn't actually coding it from scratch. This is kind of like a drag and drop app builder, I guess you could call it, in the sense of how they were doing it. I think this was Android Studio, if I'm not mistaken. This might have been a different app. Now, before I start throwing around application names, let me define Android Studio. So Android Studio is an application, a Windows application, although I think you can install it for Mac OS as well, that you download onto your computer, and is basically an application in which you can design an Android app. So, it gives you the abilities to add certain elements and everything, and then at the end of the day, it lets you build the APK file. That's all it is. And so Android Studio, I think, is the app that I was watching the first YouTube video on. And I said, okay, this isn't terrible. It's going to take me forever to build this thing, but then again, that's if I built it myself, I probably wasn't going to. But at least I know kind of what I'm doing and how this works. Now, the second YouTube video I come across, because I said, okay, fine, I watched that one. Now I'm going to watch a second one, because whenever you want to learn about something, you don't just watch one YouTube video. You watch a bunch of them, and then you combine the knowledge you get from all of them into one working framework that you can use to better apply what you learned to the situation. But you want to watch more than just one YouTube video, more than one source. So the second YouTube video I came across said how to code an app with AI. Something like that. That was the title of the video. Now, I clicked on it, and I was a little bit skeptical, I guess, just because of what I already knew about ChatGPT's inability to really take on any heavy projects. I knew that it just couldn't really do it, and so I was skeptical for that reason. But I clicked on it, and it turned out to be a 7-minute video, and I was not disappointed, because in the 7 minutes, this guy downloaded Cursor AI, which was an AI application you download from Windows and made an app from scratch and had his own APK file within 7 minutes. And this guy didn't skip any steps for the sake of simplicity or timing of the video. This guy didn't fast forward anything. Like sometimes when they do a long series of tasks and they'll put it on fast forward and put music on so you don't have to watch the whole long boring thing. He didn't do that. 7 minutes was from downloading the AI platform to having an APK file, and his app was basically, if I remember correctly, it was just a simple one-page app that pulled the weather data for the next 7 days and created a circle with a percentage number in the circle of, based on a number of factors, how good that day was for bike riding in your given location. And 100% being very good, 0% being it sucks, don't take your bike out, you idiot. And so it would compile all the weather data. So for example, wind, temperature, humidity, everything, it would compile it all into a percentage. And it would have like green, also the each day would be colored with a background of green for good, yellow / orange for moderate, red for bad. And like I said, it was just a one-page app, but still, this guy made it in 7 minutes using AI. And so after this, I was ecstatic. In fact, I texted a bunch of my friends being like, have you heard of this thing? Oh yeah, also, let me mention that I had met a couple people on LinkedIn who were into app development. I had asked all of them way prior to this, when it came to that price clicker website, do you have any alternatives to ChatGPT that you would recommend for coding a website, because ChatGPT has these output limits? And one of them said DeepSeek, another one of them said something else. And I looked into these a little bit, and they just didn't seem like they were any better, in the sense that I don't think their memory was better, I don't think their output limits were better, and I also don't think the sources of information that they were able to reference, for example, multiple files, were more were any better than that of ChatGPT's. So I didn't really look any further into them. And so I had kind of given up and just assumed that, well, this is what we're at with AI. I guess before I create this price clicker website, I'm just going to have to wait another 2 years and wait till it gets better. But then I watch this YouTube video and I figure out, holy shit, there's this AI application. So it's an application, like I said, that you download. It uses Claude AI, which is a model. It's an alternative to ChatGPT. But Claude AI, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Claude 8, whatever, it's inside the application, and it also references all of the files that you have in a parent folder, and you get to specify the parent folder. And it can read all those files and then not only suggests changes to you based on those files, and not only does it not have an output limit, but it automatically modifies those files on your computer for you. Now, okay, so obviously, I'm just going to make the observation that some people might not want to download this if they are concerned about AI having access to all the files on the computer. Technically, it's not supposed to have access to all the files on your computer. It's supposed to only have access to the files within a parent folder that you give it access to. Now, this it's called Cursor AI. It's cursor.com. I would say it's a very reputable business, reputable service. I have heard a lot of people talking about it since I've looked into it, and of course that's because I've actually looked it up specifically. But from what I can tell, it's a very reputable service. I doubt it's harvesting all your information and, I don't know, selling, I don't know. At the end of the day, any application can do that, so not just an AI application. I don't think that the AI has access to your entire computer, but I don't know that for sure either. What I do know, going away from this disclaimer, ending this, and moving back onto what I was saying, is that this thing is amazing, and it has effectively resulted in me coding a fully functional app. Now, I'm not done with the app yet, but I have done enough of it to know that this can code a fully functional multi-page app. Now, I have had some issues running it on my desktop, and my roommate has actually suggested that the reason might be because the fan in my desktop is not good at keeping the temperature down, because this Cursor AI application paired with the Android Studio application definitely will use up 100% of your processing power. And I ended up just using my laptop, and so my desktop is an i7 and my laptop is an i5, and yet my my laptop handles it better because unlike my desktop, Cursor AI did not keep crashing after like the third day of using it when I'm on my laptop. And I think that's because I have a better ventilation setup with my laptop because, instead of being a huge box, it's more of just a flat thing with a fan on the side. And I also have spacers on the laptop so that air flows underneath, and I also have a fan, an external fan blowing on my laptop. So all that put together, and these two programs run wonderfully on my laptop without crashing. And I'm going to have this app released probably in, I would say, the next 5 days. I don't see why not. I only have a couple more pages that need to be done before it has its complete functionality. Now, basically what this app does when it goes back to my alternative to Instagram is it takes all my photos and it puts them in a grid format. Now, where does it get the photos from? The photos are not coded into the app. Instead, it pulls the photos from an online source that I will be able to update and upload photos to separately, and it pulls it from that source. Same thing with my Reels. Same thing with, I'm actually going to have posts. And when I say posts, I mean think of like tweets from Twitter. But here's the thing, I use Twitter actively. So I'm not sure if I'm going to take these posts and try to integrate into Twitter's API and pull them directly from Twitter. I don't think I want to do that, and the reason that I don't think I want to do that is because I have a lot of posts on Twitter that are not retweets, but quote tweets, they're called, when you basically have a tweet that's referencing another tweet which is right below it. And if I just put that in the app, you won't be able to see the second tweet that I'm referencing, and so a lot of them will be out of context and you won't, it won't make sense. Like I'll just say like yes or agree or that type of stuff. But if you just see the word agree as a single tweet, like it doesn't make sense if you don't see the tweet that I'm referencing. And I wouldn't be able to pull the tweet that I'm referencing, or if I was able to, I wouldn't want to. I would want that app to have only original content straight from me. So I don't think I'll be doing a straight API. I think I'll be doing something where I parse only certain texts that meet certain conditions and put them into a source feed that my app pulls from separately, which still might end up using API, because I think if you try to scan the website itself using some service to scan the website without using the Twitter API, that it can only go so far before it has to sign in, and that becomes a problem. So listen, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Yeah, this is going to be one of the most challenging problems for me. I've already done the photo feed. I've already done the stories feed in terms of formatting. I still have to upload all my photos and re-upload all my stories, which I have downloaded in a folder. And I also have my Reels downloaded, but I gotta get a higher quality version of them because only one of them right now is uploaded in high quality. The rest of them, the quality sucks. So I gotta fix that. But I already have my podcasts on there. I have to make a couple small tweaks. I have to make a couple tweaks. I won't say small tweaks because they are decent tweaks that I have to make to the podcast player. For example, the cast tab currently is not working. You can't cast it to a smart speaker. I don't want to be able to do that from the app. The repeat versus don't repeat versus play the next episode button, I want to fix that a little bit. I also want to have a mark as completed feature for each episode, different things like that. And I want to also be able to make a feature where there are podcasts that you can listen to the app other than just mine. And there are a couple other things I need to do: articles, poems, and what else? Books. I want to have all those in there. I still got to do them, but a lot of the stuff I've already done, and there's still a couple other things that are going to be easier than the stuff I've already done, but they're still going to take time, and I still got to do them. But once that's done, I'm going to have an APK file ready to release, and as soon as I do that, I'm going to put it on my website at joshbauer.com/app. And then I'm probably going to make even some more updates that will exceed the basic functionality, but kind of add some extra special functionalities to it. And I will re-upload the app to my website, joshbauer.com/app, for a final APK version. And at that point, I'm going to start working on the media for the Google Play page. For example, the description and the photos, the screenshots and everything. I'm going to start working on that. And I'm going to start looking at, well, actually, I'm going to do this beforehand, but I'm going to start looking at what requirements Google Play needs in order for this app to be listed on the Google Play Store. And as soon as I make sure my app meets all those requirements, for example, having all the open source licenses, not requesting permissions that it doesn't actively need, stuff like that. There's a bunch of things that Google wants to make sure your app isn't too much space for what, all that stuff, which it won't be, by the way. So far, it's only 22 megabytes on download, which is awesome compared to a lot of apps out there. There are plenty of apps out there that, for example, YouTube Music, I think is 80 megabytes on download. Mine is 20, and mine is going to be a podcast player just the same. Might have music too, but that's something. Pretend I didn't say that, because that's a feature that we're still working on. But I think in terms of who's going to download this app, listen, I'm not so delusional as to think that every one of my followers is going to go and download my app. I think that a very small percentage of them will, but I also think that all the people that decide not to are not people I really cared about to begin with. So the people that do decide to go and download my app are really the only ones that I even care if they see it or not. The people that don't care enough to go and download it, I don't care if they see the content that's on there. So that's kind of a two-way street. And for the people that do download it, I think I'm going to try to add a little bit extra functionality in there other than just seeing my stuff, because as of now, this isn't a complete alternative social media app in a sense that other people cannot make their own profile. This is just basically my profile in a bunch of different ways, all condensed into one app, because I'm tired of being reliant on other platforms that go and change things up, that completely mess up my setup in ways that I have no say over, no control over, and no remedy for. And I'm tired of being reliant and dependent on other people's decisions for my own, I guess you could call it creative expression. And that's what this is. And that, that's why I liked Instagram a lot, was because it was a means for creative expression. I like photography just enough to like it, and just enough to, post different pictures and stuff, but not enough to get into it professionally. I almost decided to take a college class, but there were other things I prioritized above it. For example, coding, right? I wonder how that worked out. Okay, anyway, that said, creative expression alternative. That's kind of why I'm doing this. I want an alternative for me to be able to post pictures without me being jerked around by somebody else's decisions. And, if a bunch of people don't download this app, that's fine, but it's still a way for me to put my content out there and feel good about knowing that if people wanted to access it, it's there. It doesn't mean they have to, but if they wanted to, it's there. And if nothing else, at least I can see my own stuff in a way that is more appealing and looks better, more visually appealing. Now, after I put this on the Google Play Store, we're going to have to download something that I believe is called Xcode, which is like the Apple app version of Android Studio. It's like a coding framework in which you design an app for Apple. And I'm going to have to find a friend or two to lend me their iPhone so I can test it out on their iPhone and stuff, because I think you have to hook it up to your computer, and because I don't know. I don't know how that works, but basically, I'm going to have to recode this from scratch. So after I have the Android app, don't expect the Apple app anytime soon, because it's probably going to take me 3/4 as long to make the Apple app as it took me to make the Android app, which is going to be at least a couple weeks, if not a month. And that's assuming that I spend the same amount of hours per day on the Apple app as the Android app. And that's unlikely, because I was super excited when I first started designing the Android app. And when I say super excited, I mean that I didn't sleep one night. I spent 12 hours, and that 12 hours was from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., and that was the night after I realized that it took this motherfucker 7 minutes to design a whole app. So that's when I said, okay, I'm going to get this done. And I got a decent portion of the app done that night. And then the next couple nights after that, I didn't spend the whole night up, but I certainly stayed up till 4 or 5 a.m., and I was obsessed with this thing, dude. Every one of my coworkers, I was just blabbering on and on about how my app is coming along, and I know none of them really cared about it, but that's just how excited I was about this thing. As I was, the fact that here's what I was excited about: the fact that I had settled within myself on the notion that I would never be able to code an app because it was too complicated. And now here I am coding an app. That was the thing that I was excited about more than anything else, was that something that I considered to not be an option for me, not be possible for me, was now something that was possible to do within a month. And, whereas before, even if I had wanted to hire it out, I knew realistically it would probably take hundreds of hours of my time, thousands of dollars, and probably a year to complete. And now it'll be done in maybe 100 hours, maybe like, Cursor AI costs a little bit of money if you use it a lot. So maybe like $100, $200 total, and a month instead of like a year, take a month. So I was super excited about that. Now the excitement's dwindling a little bit. I'm still putting a lot of time into perfecting this thing and stuff. 2-3 hours a day is still a lot of time, and that's kind of what I've been spending on it over the past couple days. Right now, like I said, I'm still in a phase of working on this podcast player, but I think that over the next couple weeks, that excitement will dwindle a little bit, and so the Apple app will probably take more time. So unfortunately for all you people that use Apple, I'm not really a fan of your choice from the start, but that's okay. You can do what you want. I'll still make my app for you, but it just might be a little bit longer. But if you want to keep up with the dates and everything, the expected release dates, again, I'm going to have all that on my website at joshbauer.com/app. And also, if you're listening to this podcast, I just got to say, this podcast will be available on the app. Not only will it be available on the app, but I'm going to try to make it a more appealing, a better experience for you than whatever you're listening to it on now. Another thing is notifications. So if you want to be notified whenever I have a new episode on this podcast, you're going to want this app. Even if you don't use the app to listen to my podcast, and you just use the app for the notification of when I release a new episode, and then you go listen to the episode on Spotify or Apple or whatever you use to listen to your podcasts, I guess that's fine. But this app will be able to, it will have the ability to push out notifications for podcasts, tweet-like posts. I don't like calling them tweets because, first of all, it's a name from another platform. And second of all, the platform from which it is a name of no longer calls them tweets itself. Like Twitter is now called X, and they call them just posts. But when I use the word tweets just so you know what to envision when I call them posts, because basically it's just text only, short form text. Whenever I have an idea or a thought, I just kind of tweet it out. So there will be a notification option for that. There will be notifications if I put out whole new articles or videos or reels or posts or stories and all that good stuff. And I have like a notifications settings page where you can select which notifications you want and stuff. And I'm not so delusional to think that everybody cares about me this much, but you know what? Some people, I guess, do find value in some of my episodes, and I've heard that as actual feedback from people that listen to it. And so that will be one thing that you gain from this app, if nothing else. I'm going to also say that if you are somebody who has an idea for an app, okay, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to tell you to contact me because I want to collaborate with you, because honestly, I've just got a lot going on, and I'm probably not going to have time to help you make the app. But if you know me in person and you live in Buffalo at the moment or something, I can certainly help you get it set up. But I'm assuming that most people listening to that probably are not in that situation. And I will just say, assuming that you're not in a spot to actually meet in person, I probably won't be able to help you much physically. But what I will say is that I think that you have a good chance of being able to develop whatever kind of app you want, so long as it's not super complicated. And I guess everybody's definition of complicated can be a little bit different. I would say I would not do any... okay, again, it depends on your level of expertise. If you've never coded an app before and you're kind of in the same boat that I was in, where you know nothing about it, I would not try to develop anything that involves user-generated content. So alternative social media platforms, anything where you have to have a hosting platform that hosts content that is uploaded by people other than you, because that just gets super complicated. You have to have a whole framework and content distribution network, And Firebase, I know Google Firebase is probably the best way to go if you want to do that, but I know it also costs money, and you have to have Google Cloud, and if you go the Firebase route, it's just that's just a little too much complication in my opinion. Unless you really have a good idea that you think is worth it, and then go for it. I'm not discouraging you from doing it, but I would say that you're going to be spending a lot of time on it if you go that route. But if you want to go a simpler route of just pulling data from the internet and displaying it in your app, for example, weather, or I don't know, or making a little tool or something, I think it's easy. I think you should go for it, especially if you're on Android. Now, if you're on Apple, I don't know. I haven't tested Claude AI or Cursor AI on Xcode or whatever coding languages Apple uses to read their apps in. I don't know what language. I don't remember what languages they were, and I haven't tested AI's ability to code in any of those languages. So I can only speak for Android, but I will say this. AI is officially at the level where you can code an application with it, and I think that after I'm done with this app, I'm going to take this Cursor AI application and retroactively apply it to my former project that I had tried and failed, which was Price Clicker, and I'm going to try to get that functioning service up as a business. I would guess April, May-ish, if I have time, and I don't know if I'll have time because just quick update. I did get my CDL, so we're going to have some changes come along in the future, and I don't know if we're going to be having time for a lot of coding when we do implement those changes that are going to occur as a result of me getting my CDL. But what I do know is that at some point I will want to retroactively take this new information that I have gathered about an AI actually being able to do this and apply that new information and those new tools to my Price Clicker website, which could make me a lot of money per month if I get enough businesses to buy into this service. It is a B2B service, by the way. And listen, I would recommend looking into this, okay? If you have an idea for an app or a website, I think that there is no excuse for you not to try Cursor AI. Okay, let me reword that. If you have an idea and you want to get it done, okay, because you need more than an idea, okay? Let me just get this straight. You need an idea and you need a lot of motivation, because I was frustrated as hell that Instagram went and deplatformed me like this. That's essentially what they did. They deplatformed me. I'm being redundant at this point, but I formatted all my content to be what they wanted it to be, and then they went and changed it anyway. And that just frustrated me so much. I had a lot of motivation for this. And let me just make this point clear. This is not easy. Coding with AI is not easy. If you think it's going to be easy, it is not easy. You are going to be frustrated out of your mind trying to tell this AI what to do. The amount of times that I have called this thing, okay, this AI, I have called it names that is so bad that I've showed it to one of my coworkers, and she was like, I feel so bad for the AI. This is AI abuse. It's like, okay, but you don't understand why I called it this. You don't understand that I asked it to add a feature, and it added the feature and then went in and deleted all this other stuff that was completely irrelevant to the feature that I was asking it to add. And so now I had to go back and make all that other stuff all over again because I didn't make a backup. And I learned my lesson to back it up very, very frequently. But that said, you are going to be, it's not easy, okay? You can't just have an idea that you want to maybe just tell AI, make me this app. It doesn't work like that. You got to tell AI, I would like this app, but don't make the whole app yet. Start out by doing this. It does this. Okay, good, you did that well. Now put this X in the top left. Okay, now make this rectangle here. Now make this rectangle this color. Now make this the rectangle movable. Now make it so that it snaps to the top or snaps to the bottom. Now make it so that when it snaps to the top, it has a gradual a snapping effect. Now make it semi-transparent. Now put an image in the center. It's not just make me an app. You have to tell it every little thing that you want it to do. And if you want it to be the way that you want it to be, if you want it to be something that you didn't make, but that AI made, then maybe You just tell it, make me an app of a certain type, and it goes and does the whole thing. I don't know how well it's going to work out for you. I don't think it's going to work out super well, in my opinion, because from what I've noticed of this AI, the more tasks it has to focus on in a specific session being one message or one action, right? The more tasks it has to do in one action, the less intelligence it can allocate to each one of those tasks, meaning there's a higher chance that each one of those tasks or one or multiple of those many tasks are going to be defective. So you want it to focus 100% of its brain power on one small task at a time in order for it to be most effective at each one of them. And that's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take good communication. You need to have super good communication at explaining with this AI what you want it to do. If you can't properly communicate to it what you want it to do, and sometimes communicate to it in multiple ways, in multiple different ways what you want it to do, because maybe it didn't understand the first way. And sometimes, you can't rely on the AI to troubleshoot every single issue you'll run into, because you will run into not just the thing not working in the app, but also Android Studio, which is the application you code it through, will not launch your app, will not run your app if there are errors in the application code. And you can't rely on the AI for troubleshooting every single one of those errors. If it can't troubleshoot an error, sometimes you will have to step in with your brain and say, okay, whatever you're doing, it's not working, so we're going to do it my way now. I want you to do this instead, delete this, go back to this version, and let's try it this way instead. You have to use your brain in order to make up in intelligence what the AI sometimes lacks in intelligence. And I'm not a coder, but sometimes I do think I have a little bit of coding brain, and the fact that I'm able to do that, at least to the extent that I have overcame basically, okay, not all of them, because there have been a few recent ones with that podcast player where I haven't been able to fix it yet. But before that, every single issue I've run into, and there were some huge issues that took a long time to solve. For example, in the stories page, so this is basically the same stories layout as Instagram. Sometimes there are photo stories and sometimes there are video stories where, well, at one point I had, I was trying to test the video stories, and no matter how long the video story was, it would cut out after like 3 to 5 seconds. And eventually I realized the reason why is, so how when you're on a story, there's a little bar at the top and it slides slowly, and after it slides all the way over to the right, it proceeds to the next story. Well, the problem was, when I go onto a new story, the sliding bar would start moving over to the right. But say that sliding bar moved halfway, got to the 50% mark. If I swipe over the next story, instead of that progress bar at the top starting over at 0%, it would resume and pick back up off at 50%. So the second story I went to would only show for half the time it was supposed to, because that progress bar carried over the percentage status from the former story instead of restarting. And I didn't know. I told AI before, like, over and over and over, the video is still cutting out after 4 seconds, video is still cutting out after 4 seconds. But I didn't realize until I actually found out that the reason it was cutting out after 4 seconds was because that progress bar status was carrying over from the previous story. That's when I said, oh shoot, I just realized what the problem actually was. Let's fix this first, and then as soon as we fix that, the other error automatically got solved. But if I just kept telling the AI over and over, the video keeps cutting out at 4 seconds, which I did for literally hours, and that's not an exaggeration, it never would have been able to solve the issue, and it never did solve the issue until I stepped in and did troubleshooting myself and figured out what the actual issue was resulting from. So if you're thinking about making a complicated app, you need to have a lot of motivation, not just an idea, because you're going to run into issues that require determination, a lot of determination in order to fix those issues. And if you don't have that motivation, then don't even bother getting started on the app. But if you do have that, and if you really have a project that you want to follow through on, and if you're motivated with frustration or anger or passion or whatever it is, like I was at the moment, I would say this AI is the thing that's going to help you implement whatever it is you want to implement, whether it be an app or a website. maybe even a Windows application or something, which I haven't tried yet, and I don't think I'll ever want to try. I just don't see why I would have a use for it. Not many people even use Windows for Windows applications anymore. I mean, I'm using Audacity right now, which is a Windows application, but I don't know, unless you're a podcaster or a content creator or something, and in that case, I don't want to create an application for content creators because that's just way, way, way too much work. Other than that, everybody uses like mobile apps or websites, so just website applications I think are becoming irrelevant. Mobile applications I do not see becoming irrelevant in the near future. I think in a distant future maybe, like I said before, when I was talking about how learning to code an app might not be a good use of my time because in 10 years it might be different. Well, in 10 years it might be different, 15 years it might be different, but in 3 years I don't think it'll be different. In 3 years, mobile apps are still going to be the main platform through which people access all different types of services and products and games and everything. I don't see an infrastructure that's capable of replacing it. Meta's metaverse or whatever, Facebook's metaverse, is not going to replace apps in the next 3 years. I am very, very doubtful. Is it possible? I don't even think so. AI, AR, right? Augmented reality, with your glasses where you can see everything and kind of move stuff around with your hands and everything. I don't think that's gonna replace apps in the next, in the near future. So, but yeah, if you have an idea, look up Android Studio, download the Android Studio app, cursor.com, and download Cursor AI. It's going to be like $20 a month. Well, it's free technically, but if you use more than I think it's 150 questions, then it will start giving you answers after those 150 questions super, super slowly. And that will take a lot of your time. And so for the sake of saving some time, I think it will be worth that $20 a month to get faster responses after the 150 questions is surpassed. And if you're coding a complicated app, that 150 questions is going to go by pretty quick. So I would recommend getting the $20 a month, which will bump that limit up to 500 questions with Cursor AI, high-speed questions, after which point it goes to slow. And you can still keep paying. I think after that point it becomes 4 cents per question. If you want more than that for high-speed questions, you can always keep using the low-speed questions for free, and it takes like 10 or 15 seconds for it to answer each question. But I don't know. To me, it seems like it's worth the money to save some of your time. But yeah, other than that, I've basically covered some. I have covered my experience with ChatGPT. I've covered how that was ineffective and how that had a lot of shortcomings when it came to designing my website. I've covered how I never really thought that I'd be able to make an app until I looked up these YouTube videos and discovered there was a way, and how I ended up finding motivation to make my own app, which is the reason I looked up these YouTube videos in the first place. How I'm going to use this AI that I discovered while looking up how to make an app, how I'm going to use that AI to retrospectively create a website eventually that I didn't think it would be possible to create yet. I have also described some of the issues that I've run into even with Cursor AI, and how you're going to have a lot of motivation and determination to make any sort of app if you decide to do this stuff, and how you're really going to have good communication skills and effectively tell it what you want it to do. I think, wow, I did not expect this episode to be an hour long. I thought it'd be like 15 minutes, but I think I've gone over quite a bit. I think that some people might find this useful. If you have any ambitions of creating anything and you have also found similar shortcomings in ChatGPT's output limit or anything like that, unlike the advice that I have gotten from some other people, I hope that this advice will actually be useful to you, because the advice they gave me was basically just other alternatives to ChatGPT that also had output limits and stuff. And this thing doesn't really have an output limit that I've experienced, and if it does, it can't be very small, because my app it's not like super complicated, but it's not one-page app either. So I mean, you'll see when you download it. Like I said, my app will be available at joshbauer.com/app if you're interested. Even if you're just interested in seeing what AI is capable of, just download it for that purpose. And I will have it posted on there when it's ready to download. I'll have an Android APK version probably ready by March 5th, 2025 is my goal. and I will talk to everybody listening in my next episode.